Hello, everybody. I hope you have all taken the midterm exam by now and that you all did very well on that. I am going to talk to you a little bit today about the Victorian era. I posted a couple of poems for you guys to read from this era. We are going to be talking about a couple of other authors that we just don't have the time, unfortunately, to cover during this summer semester in this course today. But I wanted to give you guys some background information and some context so that you'll kind of know some of the expectations in this type of literature, kind of the trends, and start to connect the dots between where things are changing from the Romantic era that we have left in that first part of the mini-mester and the era that we are entering into as we move forward. So to get things started, of course, this is called the Victorian era because it is kind of going along with the reign of Queen Victoria. She was queen from this era is considered 1837 to 1901. So we're looking at close to mid 19th century to up to the very beginning of the 20th century. But the influence of the Victorian era really does go both over in England and around the world and in the United States well into right up until World War I. Essentially, that's when you start to see a little bit of change in things. Most of the things that are going to be influencing the literature, other types of art at this time is going to be the industrialization. So more and more factories are being built. People are moving from rural areas into the city. Political reform. We discussed, well, we didn't have a chance to discuss it, but you guys read the history of Mary Prince. So, there was a lot of abolitionist movement going on at this time and in England as well as around the world, colonial expansion. So even though we have usually associated colonization with our own place of the United States with England, they are continuing their expansion beyond the states. And then scientific advancement and social change and reform, which kind of goes along with the political reform as well. I also want to apologize. I'm recording this in my office on campus, and the air unit is super loud in here. So if any of you guys have trouble with the audio on this, make sure you're turning on closed captions. First of all, Zoom should automatically offer you closed captions. In fact, I will check real quick and make sure that that is on, just to make sure, well, if I can see that. But use the closed captions if you need to, or if you need any clarification, I can answer any questions you have or re-record potentially the video. Industrial revolution. So factory work is going to be a huge influence on different artists at this time. We know that there's already art within the Romantic period, like with William Blake and the Chimney Sweep, that is talking about capitalist practices and child labor and the abuse of the poor in order to make a buck, essentially. And this is something that continues to be prevalent both in society and in literature at this time. We're not reading Charles Dickens for this course, but Charles Dickens is very famous for a lot of his work revolving around kind of the mistreated people of society, the poor, children, orphans. Most of us are familiar with A Christmas Carol, whether we've read it or seen movie adaptations. But he uses that character of Ebenezer Scrooge to show how society views the working class and the poor. And this is illuminated through his literature. There's a lot of scientific innovation going on as well. And this is where you see artists sometimes having a struggle. We saw with William Blake and through his work, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, his kind of complicated relationship with organized religion. So you'll have these authors who are still religious and still practice an Anglo-Christian faith. However, they're also going to be looking at things such as science, the theory of evolution that we see by Charles Darwin during this time. So his exploration of the Galapagos Islands and seeing how different animals adapted to different situations and how he saw different species surviving or adapting. There's also a lot of literature about colonialism and empire. Again, there's a couple of these authors that we're not going to be able to cover just because of the shortness of this class. But some influential writers at this time that are discussing colonialization would be Joseph Conrad in The Heart of Darkness, and then also Rudyard Kipling in his satirical work, The White Man's Burden. So you have an empire with England. It's not just England, it's England, India, Australia, South Africa, Canada, all these places all over the world that are underneath English rule. And you have these authors writing about how this colonization in the name of empire is affecting these indigenous groups within these countries, these continents. And how it is detrimental to their own people and society. Very similar to kind of what we saw with the Mary Prince autobiography, but these are instead expressed in works of fiction. You also have the suffragist movement going on in England during the Victorian era. You have a female queen. Of course, she is having to answer to Parliament. So her kind of power is limited as well. But you know, this really influences women to fight for their own rights because they see this woman in a place of power, but yet they have no rights to vote. Their rights to land are very limited. Their rights to divorce are limited. And so you see kind of a push against these indoctrinated gender roles. And women in different classes are going to have different types of influence. And it's actually very interesting because you would think, you know, those with the greatest privilege would have the greatest influence. But you more so see women within working class and middle class, working class type of environments because they are part of the process of bringing money into the home and making decisions for the home, can sometimes have a little bit more influence within their own sphere rather than somebody who is upper class, who is very much put into that specific role and is stuck there. They are obviously privileged in other ways, but their sphere of influence kind of changes depending on where they're at. Some of the major writings of the time, these are the writers that we are covering this week in class, are going to be Alfred Lord Tennyson. I'm having you guys read The Lady of Shalott. I'm not going to lie, one of the reasons why I chose that is because it is probably one of my favorite poems ever. If you have a little bit of time, I definitely recommend looking up different art that has been influenced by The Lady of Shalott. I think this one's Ophelia. So this isn't exactly the correct one. This is from the textbook, and it is not going to show it because I'm blurring out stuff. But definitely go take a look at some of the paintings inspired by the Lady of Shalott. And he is also the poet laureate of England during the Victorian era. So he is paid to write and to influence other writers, and basically has been given this patronage from the country and crown to promote England via his artistic talents. We're also covering actually a married couple this week. So Robert Browning and Elizabeth Barrett Browning. We don't quite have time to go over a lot of the biographical details, but Elizabeth Barrett Browning was essentially kind of a shut-in for many years of her life, and it wasn't until she was nearly 40 that she started exchanging letters with Robert Browning, and he encouraged her in her writing and ended up marrying her. She was disowned from her family because her father kind of wanted to keep her at home, but Robert Browning essentially helped liberate her. Although women at this time, marriage could be uh, a way of ownership and limiting. This was actually an instance where her marrying her partner allowed her more freedom to work as an author and to leave her very secluded life. She did still have significant health problems for the rest of her life, but she was able to spend many years with Robert Browning. They have two very different poems that you are going to be reading. So Robert Browning's My Last Duchess, as you're listening to it, I just want to give you the context of this is someone coming into a duke's home, and the duke is basically showing his artwork to this person and is also in hopes to make a match for his own marriage. That being said, he's also talking about a painting of his last duchess. And I want you to really think about gender roles and the relationships between men and women in marriage when you are reading this poem. Conversely, you have Elizabeth Barrett Browning's How Do I Love Thee? Very famous sonnet. The very first line of it has been overused, but I encourage you to really pay attention to the rest of the poem. It is a gorgeous poem, even if we are used to the first line of that poem, How Do I Love Thee? Let Me Count the Ways, as being used over and over again in popular media. Just really pay attention to that. And I'm asking you guys this week to do a discussion board question where you're comparing these two poems. Now, these poems do not represent all of their writings, obviously, but just looking at these two poems, kind of taking a deeper look into what is the poet saying, how are they writing, and, would you picture these two as being married just by reading their work? We are not going to be reading a novel, unfortunately, because this is a summer class, but these are some famous novelists. Many of you are probably familiar with the Bronte sisters. What the Wuthering Heights adaptation just came out recently. So these, if you're curious and you like the poems, definitely encourage you to explore some novelists from this era as well. In my regular semester course, I usually teach the importance of being earnest. We're not going to have the chance to do that in this class again, but you can find the full play online for free if you're curious about Oscar Wilde. He writes satirically, so he, even as a member of higher class society, recognizes the hypocrisies and the issues of morality within that sphere and writes about it in his plays. You would probably also know Oscar Wilde from the portrait of Dorian Gray as well, or the picture of Dorian Gray. I'm going to kind of skip over this just because we, are not actually covering this play. But again, it satirizes Victorian society, especially marriage, social expectations, gender expectations, hypocrisy of the upper class. And has some pretty clever dialogue within there as well. Just an interesting fact, not long after he writes this play, Oscar Wilde is actually arrested for essentially for being a homosexual. So he ends up kind of fighting that case and never quite recovers from that scandal. Ignore the exit slip from this. Again, this is usually what I use in a longer form class, but still kind of think about the poems that you're reading today and what it says about Victorian society. You have Lord Tennyson, who is writing more so about a medieval type situation, but perhaps imposing Victorian views and ideals upon that. And then kind of the class structure that you see within Robert Browning's poem. And then the way romantic language is used in a Victorian poem through Elizabeth Barrett Browning. As always, if you guys need to meet with me for some office hours times, please shoot me an email so that we can schedule a time. Or outside of my normal office hours, we can schedule a meeting as well if I'm available. If you have not taken your midterm already, please do that as soon as possible. We have some flexible time within our schedule. However, this midterm is not one of those times. This needs to be taken within this week so that I can update everyone's grades and let you know where you stand as we are halfway through the summer semester. I hope everybody has a great holiday weekend and stay safe, stay hydrated, and I will be in communication with you guys very soon. Thank you.